What up, guys? Welcome to the Son of Wonder. Bad Batch Episode 10 is here, so let's conversationalize. Alright, guys, so this is part 2 to the part 1 of the story that we've been on with the Bad Batch since the last episode. They don't say part 1 and 2, but that's basically what it is. And I'm gonna already lay it out for you guys. I liked the first part a lot better than the second part. The first part had some really strong moments with Tech and Omega, but this part felt like it was lacking a bit. I mean, there's really not anything particularly bad with this episode. It just didn't have anything that particularly popped either. And to be honest, I was hoping they would ride that tension of the storm coming for them, the Bad Batch, as they were standing together as a family in that last shot of the last episode. But they really don't. Like, it just opens up with them trying to fix a speeder to travel to the next town over in daytime. So, like, we don't really know what happened to the storm or anything like that. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But Omega has this idea to track the Gonk droid on their ship. And sure enough, it leads them to a nearby town. Or not a nearby town. Like, I think it was 100 miles away. But a kid had stolen the ship, so it was not Hondo Ohnaka. Unfortunately, I know you guys are probably really bummed that I don't get to quote all the Hondo Ohnaka lines for you. I know you're probably really sad about that, but it wasn't him. I was really hoping it was him, but it wasn't. And even like rewatching the episode with my family, my mom pointed out to me that the hands that were driving the speeder toward the ship were human, so it couldn't have been a pirate. It couldn't have been Hondo Ohnaka because he's an alien species, but it's a pretty young kid. His name is Benny. And he's working for this guy, Mako, who's like this fat, older alien with this cane and this robot hand. He's just a complete slob and disgusting. But he's taking advantage of all these kids, having them work in his mine so they can get shares of food and water. Like, the way it works is whichever kid earns the most, they call it the top earner, gets a bowl of food for themselves. So generous, one bowl of food. And then all the other kids have to share one bowl. So he's a very cruel, horrible person, this Mako, but he acts like he's so benevolent and he's like, taking care of all these children. I know I've used this a lot, but it's useful. It's very useful to convey certain things. But the Bad Batch end up finding Benny, the kid who stole their ship. And Benny is very quickly intimidated by the Bad Batch, and the Bad Batch get him to lead them to their ship. And when they get there, you learn that apparently the mine that Mako has been having the kids mine, the Ipsium mine, has apparently been, again, with these quotation marks, degraded. And Mako's been telling the kids that there's not enough Ipsium in the mine to make a profit, so he's been sharing what he can so kindly with the rest of the children, and being so polite and giving them the scraps that they acquire from the small profits. So Benny leads the batch to the Marauder, and they've also recovered their Gonk droid at this point, but the ship is in pieces, so they need to put it back together, and they need to turn off the ray shields that are around the mine so the ship can leave. And Omega goes with Benny because Benny knows where the tower is that controls the ray shields. And so this whole time, Benny's a very bratty kid. He's acting like Mako's so benevolent. He's hesitant about doing anything for the Bad Batch, even though he stole their ship. And they get to the tower, him and Omega do. And Benny is so convinced of Mako's supposed benevolence. Wow, I'm using that a lot. And he actually thinks that Mako really cares about him and the other kids. And so he betrays Omega. He sells her out. He presses a button that alerts Mako of the Batch's presence. And Mako's droid alerts him that the Bad Batch is there. And he's stuffing his face with food and drink, taking advantage of the kids' hard work by getting the profits from the mine. And the kids are the one who did the work. And it's funny because I've seen this plot line before several times. The main one that came to my mind was in an episode of Batman the Animated Series called The Underdwellers. And it was very similar, of this older guy taking advantage of all these orphans and sending them out into Gotham City to go bring back food for him, and he gives them just a little bit. Very, very similar to this situation, but the Star Wars version. But amid trying to turn off the ray shields, Omega ends up coming across Mako's profit records, and she tells Benny that he's lying. He's making way more profit off this mine than he's been telling you guys. And there's a whole bunch of Ipsium in here. It's not degraded at all. And Benny's like, what? No way. He cares about us. He would never lie to us. Sure enough, he sees it, and then he realizes he lied to them. What a shock. But then Mako captures Omega because Benny is a treacherous brat, and the rest of the batch end up being discovered, and it's a standoff above the really hot, I assume like lava Ipsium mine in this, giant cavern that they're in, and on these bridges. And Mako's droid has Omega hanging off the other bridge, and Mako's like, if you don't drop your weapons, I'll tell my droid to throw her off. And so they start to put down their weapons, but then Hunter's off at a distance, and so he gets his grapple gun out to try to grapple to the bridge that Omega's on. And there's this really cool moment where Benny has just alerted the other kids. I say kids, they're like pre-teens, early teenager kind of age, but the other kids have the Bad Batch at gunpoint, or at least Wrecker and Tech, and that's when Benny lets the other kids know that Mako's been lying to them the whole time. So all the kids start turning against him, and then Mako tells the droid to throw Omega off the bridge, and the droid starts to, but Omega grabs onto the droid's hand and starts leaning the droid off the bridge with her, knowing that Hunter is going to grapple to the bridge and catch her at the last minute. And she didn't lose her cool that entire time, and that's the thing that got me. That was the standout of that moment. Probably the standout of this episode is that she did not panic. Like, she panicked a little bit when the droid was about to first throw her off, but she grabbed on, she saw Hunter from a distance, and she knew immediately what he was going to do. And they have, like, their plans, their very strategic plans that they have with each other that she's in on now. It was just so cool to see that play out, and the trust that Omega and Hunter have with each other, where she can literally purposefully fall with the droid into a pit of lava, knowing that Hunter is going to save her and not being worried a bit. That's just cool. Like, seeing her confidence in Hunter is just really awesome. But as the kids surround Mako on the other bridge, Mako ends up falling off one of the sides, tries to grab onto Benny, even though Benny's trying to save his life, which to me, when I saw that, I was like, why are you trying to save him? He's been taking advantage of you this whole time. Let him fall in the lava. But, characters are nice in shows and movies, or at least the ones that are supposed to be good guys are. But Benny tries to save him. Mako's not having it. He's like, you'll pay for double-crossing me, trying to grab Benny with his robot arm. And then, amidst the struggle, Mako falls into the lava pit. I kind of wished that, Hunter would have shot Mako, or one of the Bad Batch would have, shot his arm trying to save Benny, and then he would have fallen in the pit. But it's kind of weird how he just struggles, and he's got this tight grip with his robot hand, but then somehow still slips from Benny's arm and then falls into the pit. I didn't really understand that, but he's dead, so that's what the important thing is, that he's dead. Now that the ordeal is over, Benny's given the Batch all their stuff back from their ship so they can leave. And Benny says that the kids are going to still keep working the mine. And Omega's like, you can go anywhere. And Benny's like, oh, we'll stay here. It's not so bad. Now that we can divvy out the shares accordingly, not the way that Mako was keeping greedily all the other shares for himself, we can, actually, get the proper food and water that we need as we're mining. So he's good. And honestly, he still just seemed like a brat kid by the end of the day. It's like, he didn't do that many things for me to be like, oh yeah, Benny's cool now. It's like, yeah, sure, he turned around at the end, but I mean, that was only because Omega showed him the profit records. Just the general fact, like earlier in the scene where they were in the tower, Omega flat out gives Benny some of her rations, her food, because Benny didn't get the title of top earner, so he didn't get the food from Mako, and he was all upset about that. And even after that, he still chooses to go along with his plan to sell her out. And I just feel like that's cold, man. He just seemed like such a brat. Like, I don't want to see him again. Like, I don't care. A lot of this whole general arc I don't care about. I think there probably is a more compelling story they could have told as the part 2 to the last episode. But at the end of the day, the episode was fine. It accomplished the goal of getting the Bad Batch off the planet, back to Sid, And I'm very curious to see what her response is going to be when she realizes that they're back. It's great because we don't know how long the Bad Batch had to stay on that planet trying to fix that speeder since the ending of the last episode. So it's possible Sid may not have kept her word when she said that she was going to send out a ship for them in a few days. I'm really thinking that Sid's dark side is going to be coming out in these later episodes, and she's going to reveal her true colors by really only being out for herself. But that's pretty much the episode. That is my review of the episode. Not a ton going on here. Not a ton that's important. There is this one cool moment at the end where Omega tells Tech that the Bad Batch has seen so much of the corruption around the galaxy, such as Mako and other bad guys, and she's worried about that, and she's concerned that there is so much. And Tech's like, yeah, there is a lot of those people like Mako out there, but there's also a lot of people like us out there too, and that's something. And I really liked that response from Tech, especially with the emotional conversation they had in the last episode. I like that they kind of paid that off again in this one, where Tech is there to comfort Omega with the problem she's struggling with in her head, like he did in the last episode eventually. So I thought that was really cool to see. That was another standout moment of the episode. But that is my review for Bad Batch episode 10. I hope things will pick up in these next episodes. Things will start tying together. Go back to Crosshair. I want to see what happened to Cody. I am kind of curious where he is in all of this, because he wasn't in those really two important political thriller episodes. But thank you guys for watching. Have a very blessed day. May the Lord be with you. May the Force be with you. Goodbye. Move this. And that's a wrap.